I'm Ramesh Ramachandran, and this is Voice of the Global South. All right then, let's get started. On the show this week, did the US really destroy Iran's nuclear program? We sift the facts and examine the evidence so that you have all the answers you need. What's behind a surge in abduction of children in Mozambique? And inspiration or appropriation? An Italian fashion brand Prada showcases the iconic Kolhapuri chappals with no acknowledgement or compensation to the original Indian artisans. All that and much, much more coming up on Voice of the Global South. Tensions between Iran and Israel, and by extension the West, have entered a new phase. After enduring a series of devastating airstrikes on its nuclear infrastructure, Iran has decided to suspend its cooperation with the UN nuclear watchdog. Tehran accuses the International Atomic Energy Agency of becoming a quote-unquote political tool of the West and claims that its civil nuclear program will continue apace. But Trump insists that Iran's nuclear facilities were completely destroyed. And Trump adds a caveat though, "I will not hesitate to bomb Iran again if necessary," he says. So, is Iran's nuclear program dead or alive? It all started with Israel bombing Iranian nuclear sites on 13th June. Operation Rising Lion wiped out the top echelons of Iran's military leaders and nuclear scientists and targeted nuclear sites and missile silos. Iran responded by firing missiles that pierced Israel's air defenses in large numbers for the first time. And then on 22nd of June, the US launched Operation Midnight Hammer and joined Israel's military campaign against Iran. It dropped so-called bunker buster bombs, each weighing more than 13,000 kilograms, on Iran's Fordo nuclear enrichment facility. Also targeted were the nuclear facilities at Natanz and Isfahan. It was the biggest Western military action against Tehran since the 1979 Iranian Revolution. Trump says the nuclear sites have been totally obliterated, an assertion he has repeated since then. But some reports claim that the bombs dropped on Fordo and Natanz did not fully destroy the Iranian nuclear program. One reason could be that Iran moved 400-odd kilograms of its uranium stockpile to a safer location before the US airstrikes.
This is number one priority, like you say. We know that, I had received a letter from the Iranian foreign minister saying that they had taken protective measures already. They did not get into details into what that meant, but clearly that was the implicit meaning of that. So we can imagine that this material is there.
But the US denies that possibility.
Closely, and there was no indication to the United States that any of that enriched uranium was moved prior to the strike.
Now, international reaction was swift. IAEA Chief Grossi acknowledges that Iran's program suffered enormous damage, but without oversight, the world has no way of knowing how much enriched uranium Iran has or where it might be hidden. If Iran indeed possesses the said quantity of highly enriched uranium, then it effectively cripples the UN Nuclear Agency's ability to monitor Iran's compliance with the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which is a cornerstone of global nuclear security. Time magazine cites a classified U.S. government report as concluding that while the strikes caused significant disruption, they may have only delayed Iran's nuclear program by a few months. The Washington Post newspaper's editorial board writes that Trump's declaration of victory appears to have been, at best, premature. For its part, Iran initially downplayed the damage. Its supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, called the strikes useless. Its foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, accused the U.S. of exaggerating the effectiveness of the strikes. But Iran's Atomic Energy Agency later admitted that several of its centrifuges had permanently been disabled and that the repairs could take years. So, it all boils down to three key questions, and we pose them to an Indian scholar. First, did U.S. strikes partially or completely destroy Iran's nuclear facilities?
The US strike on Pardo with 30,000-pound GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator, which uses its weight and sheer kinetic force to reach highly protected deep targets delivered by the B-2 steel bomber, did massive damage. There is no denial about that. But this damage seems partial in nature.
Next, has Iran's nuclear program been set back by months, years, or decades?
It is true that extensive damage was done, but it is also true that the Iranian nuclear establishment has the capability and know-how to rebuild these damaged facilities. For Iran, it may take a couple of years. More significantly, the nuclear program may keep going if there is an undetected Iranian facility somewhere hidden. This possibility also not be completely or ought not to be completely ruled out.
And finally, did Iran remove its enriched uranium stockpile to a safer location before the U.S. strikes?
That Iran may have moved its 60% enriched uranium cannot be completely ruled out. This is based on not only the lack of expected radiation level, but also on the basis of the statement made by the IAEA chief to its Board of Governors meeting, where it would have been moved, Iran would have moved it to. It's a $100 billion question. If they have got any secret facility, they may claim that the uranium enriched to 60% had been damaged in the attack, or they may, if they play honestly, and if they fear that it may be detected, then they may declare it to the IAEA. Hopefully it may happen.
So by many accounts, Iran's nuclear program is not dead. It is very much alive, and if Iran's uranium stockpile is intact, it can produce up to 10 nuclear bombs, which raises even more questions. Here are three more issues confronting Iran and the rest of the world. Will Iran quit the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty? Does Khamenei have a succession plan in place? And has Netanyahu put Trump's quest for a Nobel Peace Prize in jeopardy? France's President Emmanuel Macron warns that Iran might quit the Non-Proliferation Treaty altogether. And if that happens, the UN sanctions could be reimposed on Iran and the diplomatic clock would run out. So, the short answer to will Iran quit the NPT is that, well, we don't know yet. Next is the question about Khamenei's successor. The 86-year-old Ayatollah Ali Khamenei is reportedly in seclusion and under heavy security. Could he be working on a succession plan? Possibly, yes. There is more than one contender in the reckoning to succeed him. One is his own son, Mojtaba, a hardline cleric with strong links to the security apparatus, but no official role in the government. Another is Hassan Khamenei, the grandson of the Islamic Republic's founding father, Ruhollah Khamenei. He has reformist leanings and is widely seen as a more conciliatory figure at home and abroad. And then there are Ali Reza Arafi and Hashem Hosseini Bushiri. The eventual selection could redefine Iran's future direction. The urgency of the task was underlined in September when Israel killed Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah, a close ally of Khamenei's, and before that in May when Iran's president Ibrahim Raisi died in a helicopter crash. Raisi was seen as a top contender to succeed Khamenei. Succession planning gained more traction following the Israeli and US attacks on Iran. Now, Khamenei hasn't publicly expressed any preference for his successor. Some reports say that he has repeatedly opposed the idea of his son taking over, driven partly by concerns over Iran returning to the hereditary rule that ended with the ousting of Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, the last monarch of Iran, in 1979. And then there is the oft-repeated question of what happens to a Nobel for Trump. A Republican Party lawmaker, Buddy Carter, is the latest to join the list of people who have nominated Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize. Carter credits Trump with, quote-unquote, preventing the world's largest state sponsor of terrorism from obtaining the most lethal weapon on the planet. Now, this is not the first time Trump has been nominated. He was previously considered for his role in the Abraham Accords and for mediating talks between North Korea and South Korea. He was nominated in 2018, 20, 21 and 24 for various reasons, including his efforts to broker a deal between Serbia and Kosovo. But Trump launching military strikes on Iran has drawn backlash. Pakistan has withdrawn its Nobel endorsement, citing civilian casualties from the military campaign. On 25th January, on this very show, we had asked, can Trump win a Nobel? And what should matter most, accomplishment or ideology? Now, Trump accuses the Nobel Committee of bias. He says they only give it to liberals. But today, after everything that's happened between Iran on the one hand and Israel and the US on the other, the question to ask is as much philosophical as it is political. Can the destruction of nuclear sites in a sovereign country be framed as a peace effort? Insurgents linked to the Islamic State terror group in Mozambique are increasingly abducting children. At least 120 children have been abducted this year. They are being exploited for forced labor and transporting looted goods, or as Ragini Sudhir Chauri reports, pressed into service as child soldiers, or worse, forced into marriage.
A dire situation is unfolding in northern Mozambique, where at least 120 children have been kidnapped in recent days by jihadist insurgents. Human Rights Watch is raising the alarm over a surge of abductions in the country's conflict-ridden Cabo Delgado province, calling the situation one of the world's most neglected crises. The children, according to Human Rights Watch, have been taken by a local armed group linked to the Islamic State known as Al-Shabaab, not to be confused with the Somali-based group of the same name. These children are allegedly being forced to transport looted goods, perform hard labor, and in many cases serve as child soldiers or be subjected to forced marriages. Mozambique has been locked in a conflict in the oil-rich Cabo Delgado region since 2017 as government forces struggle to contain an Islamist insurgency. they've had to rely on troops from Rwanda, South Africa, and other regional allies to counter the violence. Yet, despite these efforts, the attacks and now child kidnappings are on the rise. Human Rights Watch reports that some children abducted earlier this year were eventually released, but many are still missing. Those who do return home often have trouble reintegrating into their communities with limited resources for recovery or support. Local civil society groups and UNICEF have echoed growing concern over the surge in kidnappings. In recent months, there have been several confirmed abduction incidents. On 23rd January, 7 children, including 4 girls, were kidnapped. Only 2 were released. In March, 6 children were taken to help transport stolen goods. Most were freed the next day. In May, the abductions continued, with a total of 9 girls and 2 boys taken across multiple incidents. Locals say the abductions are not random. When Al-Shabaab militants enter or attack a village, they often seize children to train and use them as fighters. A member of the Association of Women in Legal Careers in Cabo Delgado warns this has become a disturbing and routine tactic. The violence has already claimed more than 6,000 lives since the insurgency began, displacing nearly 1.4 million people and derailing development works, including a gas project. The United Nations says that more than 600,000 people have fled their home, with the crisis spilling into neighboring provinces. Adding to the hardship, Cabo Delgado has been battered by cyclones and cut off from international support after US President Donald Trump's government slashed foreign aid. Meanwhile, political unrest following last year's post-election protest has drawn attention away from the growing crisis. The Secretary General of the Norwegian Refugee Council visited the region earlier this month and described northern Mozambique as a neglected crisis. The Council warned that climate shocks, escalating violence, and worsening hunger emergency are devastating communities. More than 5 million people in the country now face critical levels of hunger, with nearly 1 million in emergency hunger conditions. Human Rights Watch is calling on Mozambique's government to act urgently, not just to find the missing children, but to prevent further abductions. It is calling for medical care, psychosocial support, and robust reintegration programs for the rescued children. Mozambique is already bound by both national and international laws that protect children from exploitation and abuse, including the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, and the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. Recruiting or using children under the age of 15 in combat is a war crime. A representative of Human Rights Watch summed up the urgency of the moment by saying that Mozambique's government needs to take concrete actions to safeguard children and prevent armed groups from using them as tools of conflict. Ragini Sudhir Chaure's report for DD India.
Italian luxury fashion brand Prada's Spring-Summer 2026 men's collection has stirred controversy. Showcased in Milan, the collection featured models sporting sandals that unmistakably resembled India's traditional Kolhapuri chappals. Fashion insiders and critics were quick to call out Prada for cultural appropriation. Others accused the brand of copying without giving due credit to India's artisanal heritage. Ragini Sudhir Chaure has more.
What if I told you the chappals you wear every day are now being sold for more than 1.2 lakh rupees? Sounds funny, right? Now imagine your everyday gamcha or dupatta costing lakhs of rupees. Sounds absurd, but it's real. Indian wear is being extracted, renamed, upscaled, and slowly erased. Designs that have existed in India for centuries are now being sold back to us, rebranded as luxury and without a word of credit. Take Prada's Spring 2026 men's collection. Models walked confidently down the runway in tan ring-toe sandals that felt oddly familiar to Indian eyes. These weren't high fashion innovations. They were unmistakably the Kolhapuri chappals, a traditional Indian footwear handcrafted in the western state of Maharashtra for generations. But on the runway in Milan, there was no mention of Kolhapur, no tribute to the artisans. Just a luxury designer label with a price tag of more than $1,000. That is about 1.2 lakh Indian rupees. To top it off, Prada even sent out leather toe rings as part of its invitation for the show, a cheeky nod to the aesthetic. Again, no credit to where the aesthetic came from. What the global fashion press applauded as original design was simply heritage stripped of its roots, polished for Western eyes, and sold for a profit. Indian fashion enthusiasts immediately recognized the chappals and asked the obvious question: why wasn't their origins acknowledged? Social media lit up with concern. The pattern was all too familiar. Global fashion houses using Indian designs without even as much as an acknowledgement, leave alone credit. One YouTuber joked, wear these chappals to buy milk from the market. It was funny, but it also cut deep.
It's the same chappal I wear every Diwali under my kurta pajamas, and sometimes to go get milk from the store.
And let's be honest, this isn't the first time it has happened. Remember when a brightly embroidered, draped shoulder scarf went viral on TikTok for being described as a Scandinavian wedding accessory? But Indians knew exactly what it was: a dupatta, not some Nordic fashion fantasy.
I'm wearing a Scandinavian scarf. That's literally a dupatta, Randy.
This cultural appropriation has been going on for years. Paisley patterns born in Persia and India are now branded as Western bohemic chic. Lehengas rebranded as maxi skirts, bindis marketed as festival gems, mehndi sold as temporary tattoos, and dhotis have turned into harem pants. It's cultural laundering. Take, rename, sell, and then deny. It doesn't stop there. A recent Y2K trend is a two-piece prom dress that resembles the lehenga, but no one seemed to know or care where the style came from. Indians are going online and starting to demand credit for it.
Hold on, what? Beaded maxi skirt? It's a lehenga and it's Indian. Give credit. Stop rebranding. It's Indian. Say it.
Then there's beauty. In 2022, model Hailey Bieber launched a trend she called the brownie glazed lips with a brown pencil, blending it in and finishing it with gloss. The internet applauded. But Black and Latina women had been doing this since the 1990s, not for style, but because it was their only option when shades didn't exist for their skin tone. The same thing happened with Bieber's clean girl aesthetic, another recycled look taken from women of color and rebranded as minimalistic chic. Let's be clear, fashion should not be limited by geography. Fusion and inspiration are how art grows. But there's a world of difference between celebration and erasure. Appreciation means acknowledgement, it means collaboration, it means sharing the spotlight with profits. Appropriation is when culture is used as a costume, where the look is kept, but the people, the history, and the craft are erased. If Prada truly wanted to honor the Kolhapuri chappal, they would have worked with the very artisans who make them. They could have spotlighted their craft, paid them fairly, and told their story to the world. But that didn't happen. Instead, the design was polished, packaged, and presented as original, another example of fashion's favorite trick. Take the trend, deny the roots. Maybe next it'll be a sari blouse rebranded as a bridal crop top. Maybe juttis will be reintroduced as Moroccan slippers. Who knows? And if the beauty industry can celebrate Korean skincare, why can't the fashion world credit Indian fashion when it draws from it? Maybe it's time we stop calling it traditional wear, as if it's outdated or belongs to the past. Maybe it's time we start calling it what it truly is, an Indian wear. Ragini Sudhir Chaure's report for DD India.
And with that, it's a wrap. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.